Today, the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation is signing the Save the Fraser Declaration, which you may have heard of. So they've got a signing ceremony this evening, and I'm running around trying to be helpful towards that. So forgive my lateness. And I missed the first part of what Kennedy told you, so I'm sure he told you all the important facts. So maybe I'll just tell you a little bit about the Wilderness Committee's campaign around this, which there's our publications in the back. Can somebody hold up that Wilderness Committee paper in the back? There you go. Thank you. Yeah. So that's our new publication. We printed 55,000 of them 2 months ago. We are down to 2,000 and just did a reprint of another 30,000. Just anecdotally speaking, it tells you a little bit about how interested people are in this issue in British Columbia. The folks who've been around the Wilderness Committee longer than me tell me that's the quickest we've gone through a print of a paper since Clayoquot Sound, or maybe even faster than we did at the time. So I mean, this is a real top-of-mind issue, of course, for everybody. But for many people, you know, they've heard a lot more about the Enbridge pipeline than they have about the Kinder Morgan pipeline. So we're concerned about the export of tar sands oil, just broadly speaking. You know, we work to oppose the Keystone pipeline, the Enbridge pipeline. But the majority of my work is on the Kinder Morgan pipeline, largely because there wasn't a lot of other people working on it full time when I first got involved in it about a year ago, except for Celine.
No.
So the paper that we published was basically trying to show the links and the common thread between these various different pipeline projects. And I'm sure, as I said, probably Kennedy's told you this the broad strokes of it. So what we're trying to do is basically target frontline communities, folks who are sort of directly in the path of the pipeline and who are living around Burrard Inlet in the area where the tankers pass by. So we're hosting a series of town hall meetings of our own, as well as attending meetings all over the region, and doing presentations to make people aware of the implications of these projects. So as you understand, you know, there'd be a big change happening to our inlet if this Kinder Morgan pipeline, the new pipeline, was allowed to go forward. I, for one, don't even call it a twinning. I think it's a new pipeline, not a twinning of an existing pipeline. I call the old one the Trans Mountain pipeline and the new one the Kinder Morgan pipeline, because I think they're pretty fundamentally different projects. The Trans Mountain pipeline was largely about local oil consumption. There was, of course, some oil being exported, but the vast majority of what was going through that pipeline was being consumed locally. As you probably heard, there used to be 4 refineries on Burrard Inlet that serviced our local needs. We're now just down to the 1. And increasingly we're actually exporting our own oil to be refined somewhere else and then brought back up here for our consumption. Which, you know, just doesn't stand for the most basic reason, you know, outside of concerns about oil spills. It just doesn't really make sense. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges we have actually in communicating about these pipelines is many people think, well, a new pipeline means cheaper gas, or it means more access to fuel, or perhaps, you know, well, how can we oppose a pipeline when we use gasoline ourselves? Doesn't that make me a hypocrite? Is kind of one of the #1 questions I get. And for that reason, we're doing a couple of different things. First one being trying to make people aware that this is an export pipeline. This is a pipeline of a company called Kinder Morgan, the biggest pipeline company in the world, making, you know, billions of dollars. It's not about local oil consumption. But the other thing we're doing is we're also trying to make the link to the demand side. You know, with the pipeline's kind of the supply side, we also want to look at what can be done to reduce our dependence on oil. And as much as this new pipeline is not about our local consumption, it's about export, it is worth having the conversation about, okay, well, what is our relationship with oil? And if we're saying that the world really needs to phase out our dependence on oil, what's our part of that likely? And that really comes down to a couple of different things, but primarily transportation investment. You know, tar sands oil is not being used to generate electricity by and large. It's being used for transportation fuel, particularly heavy fuel for things like airplanes and bunker fuel for large shipping vessels. You know, so if we're serious about ending our dependence on oil, you know, as much as I'm a big fan of bringing in lots of wind turbines and geothermal power and that sort of thing, you know, if we just get more electricity online and we don't deal with the transportation infrastructure and the urban planning sort of piece of this, we're never really going to get to the place where we've actually phased out our dependence on oil. You know, unless all of us switch to electric cars tomorrow, which I don't see happening, you know, even if we had strong laws that said all new cars that were being bought in Canada had to be electric, which I don't think Harper's planning that anytime soon. You know, so even if we did go that direction, you're talking about 30 years until the existing automobiles on the road reached end of life and could be replaced. But you know, if we look at things like the BC Transit Plan, which was a great plan that never received the funding, or you know, things like the interurban rail line, which has been a big topic of conversation to get folks out to the valley, using the existing rail line as opposed to, you know, just ever expanding highways that eat up our farmland. You know, these kind of have some solutions embedded. So a big part of our campaign is becoming what we're calling getting Canada on the right track. And these are things that you know, can be done at the local level. You don't have to rely on Stephen Harper to sort of be a supporter of public transit funding in the province, or of the interurban rail line up to the Big Fraser Valley. So yeah, we're basically just taking the show on the road this summer. We're heading all over the Kinder Morgan pipeline route. We're going to try to match up with the appearances that Kinder Morgan's making in communities, so folks are hearing the other side of the story. Distributing our newspapers, knocking on doors, good old-fashioned community organizing. So the first of our self-organized town hall meetings is actually this week coming up on Thursday. We've got an event at the Roundhouse Community Center at 7 o'clock in the evening. And it's focused on what the impact of an oil spill would be on Stanley Park. And we've actually produced a report along with the Stanley Park Ecology Society. Rex Weiler, one of the founders of Greenpeace, was our lead author. And we've got Nikki Sharma from Vancouver Parks Board on a panel, as well as myself and Sven, who some of you met from Tanker 3BC, who's at the last one of these events, I believe. So we're doing a series of these kind of localized reports, which are sort of a useful organizing tool, but also, I think, make real what some of the implications of an oil spill would be on local communities. You know, we talk a lot in sort of broad strokes, and you know, we're lucky to have somebody like Kennedy doing this work to sort of look at what the local implications are in Burnaby, but that definitely isn't the case everywhere along the pipeline route. So we're trying to sort of fill in some of the gaps and produce some projections of what could be expected and anticipated. And I'm probably getting close to the end of my time, but I'll end with one point. I'm not sure if Kennedy got into this or not, so forgive me if he did. But you know, one of the other things I think that's really important, and this is going to be one of the main points you'll see in our report. I'm giving a little bit of a sneak peek at what's going to be in our Stanley Park report, and the one that we're going to do about Point Grey as well. Is we're looking at the difference between the diluted bitumen and the sort of traditional forms of oil that were being transported through these pipelines. And for anybody who's paid attention to what happened with the Kalamazoo River spill, you can really see that there's a big difference between the kind of oil that's being transported through these pipelines today and the kind of oil that you know, we were sort of more used to. You know, the lighter, sweet crude, the stuff that, you know, used to bubble to the surface when you drilled a hole in the right place. You know, the days of that are long gone. Now what we're talking about is, you know, very heavy, very sour kind of oil that's very deep underground. It needs to be heavily processed just to make it into a viable fuel product. And to move it through pipelines, you need to blend it with this diluent or condensate, basically a product that helps break down the oil to the point where it's viscous enough that you can actually push it through a pipeline. And what we've seen happen in Kalamazoo is that when you had a spill of that, basically the chemicals all evaporated, and then the oil got heavy and sunk deep into the riverbed, and made it extremely difficult to clean up, unlike sort of oil spills that we're more used to dealing with. So I think this is kind of the new normal, is this stuff, this dilbit as they call it, or diluted bitumen. Well, I keep calling it diluted instead of diluted. Maybe it's a Freudian slip. Thank you for that. So yeah, this is just one thing to sort of keep an eye out for, is when people tell you this is the same pipeline that's been around for 60 years, it's always been safe. Of course, there's been a number of incidents, which I'm sure you're all well aware of. But you know, on top of these incidents, it's also worth noting that this is for a very different purpose for the sake of export, and a very different kind of oil than we've seen traditionally. So maybe with that, I'll end my talking and get into someone's talking and some questions. So, thanks.